Good morning, everyone. My name's Ray Hoff. I'm a board member for David's Hope. I'd like to all welcome you to Step Up AZ 2018. I'm the one that does the housekeeping stuff, so okay. Please visit our exhibitors outside. We have 16 of them, so they would really enjoy you stopping by and talking to them and find out their information. We have a timekeeper for those that are doing presentations, and that's Gail. She's outside right now. She'll hold up a sign for 3 minutes and 1 minute, so just so you know that. Huh? Yeah. I'd like to pay special tribute to the sponsors this year. Our platinum sponsor is Arizona Complete Healthcare. For those of you that don't know who that is, that's Simpatico. Our other platinum sponsor is MIHS. Our silver sponsor is Mercy Care. Our bronze sponsors are DMG, the NARBA Institute, Janssen, Teros, and Community Health Associates. I'd like to also mention, and when your name is called, if you'd please stand. These are the members of the planning committee, those that helped make this possible. Pat Benchek. Pat? Just go ahead and hold your applause till we're all done. Mary Lou Bernchick. Audrey Dorfman. Steve Harvey. Me? Kate Lawson? Kate's not here yet? Okay. Gail Malone, she's outside. Sorry about that. Dr. Dawn Noggle? Sherry Phenix? Sherry must, oh, you're behind me.
I'm here.
Sorry about that. And Bea Thayer. Thank you. We have a person who is our point person, and that's Audrey. So if you have any problems at all, just get a hold of Audrey and she'll take care of it for you. And Audrey, I also need for you to bring in our little surprise. Mary Lou, for all the work that you've done for us, we'd like to present you with these flowers. Put them on your table. And there's one last thing. Tomorrow, if you are staying in the hotel and if you have luggage, instead of putting it in your car, if you take it to the main desk, they will keep it for you. Okay? And now I'll turn the mic over to Sherry.
Hi, as she said, I'm Sherry Phenix. I've had the honor of being on David's Hope's board for the last 3 years and working with them on the Criminal Justice and Mental Health Coalition many years before that. I just wanted to say that I get to work with Mary Lou, Ray, and all the other board members and coalition members. It has been an honor because, as you know, our common purpose is to step up. We need to serve the underserved as well as many of the people that are forsaken in our communities. So let's step up. Thank you. Mary Lou?
Thank you, Ray and Sherry. And Ray Hoff, I tell you, we would not have this event today here if it hadn't been for the millions of hours that Ray's put in over this process. So let's give her another round of applause. I want to thank our friends and partners who have stuck with us over these years. We've been having our summit, and starting with the Arizona Sheriff's Association, the Arizona Psychiatric Society, and the Arizona Association of Counties that's partnering with us in the stepping up work that's taking place across the state of Arizona. I also want to mention NAMI Arizona, led by Director Jim Dunn. I think, Jim, I saw you a second ago. Jim, do you mind standing? I want to give... And Kathy Basher, are you here yet? I don't know, but she'll be receiving an award later tonight. But Kathy's with Access, and you know, she represents peers, and she does a darn good job of representing family members as well. And she does a darn good job of representing everyone in our state as far as I'm concerned. Being the voice, that wild voice that's crying in the wilderness amidst all the bureaucracy and all the other processes of law and order that are going on in the state. So just want to give a shout out to both of them. I again want to thank our sponsors. I know we again mentioned Arizona Complete Health and Maricopa Integrated Health Systems for their platinum sponsorship. We're going to hear later at lunchtime briefly from representatives from both of those organizations. Greg Taylor from Arizona Complete Health and Vicki Staples from Maricopa Integrated will be sharing with you briefly about the work that they're doing in their organizations to promote the improvement of mental health criminal justice collaboration around the state. So again, hats off to organizations that have really stuck with us and all of our sponsors. Without you, we would definitely not be able to do the work that we're doing. So we extend our deepest appreciation to you all. I just want to talk a minute about how grateful I am for each one of you. We've had cooperation from and partnership from, I think we tried to do a count. I believe we have 12 counties represented here today. So yeah. We did our best to get all 15, but it just didn't seem like it had happened. We'll still be evaluating that after today. But I think that's a pretty good show. And the ability for us to communicate is really, this summit is really a key piece of the ability for us and all of you that are doing the work of improving mental health criminal justice collaboration in your counties. We hope that this summit is more than just a time to hear some interesting speakers, but we hope that you will find tools here that you maybe haven't been aware of to this point, and be able to talk to other county leaders that are doing the same work and maybe gotten to a point where they can show you something that worked, that they used, that you haven't tried yet. So, and you know, it seems no matter how far along you get, it seems like actually the farther along you get, you realize how far behind you really are. So I'm sure a lot of you are used to that feeling. I want to talk a little bit about what's going to take place tomorrow. At the end of our conference, we are going to have the expert speaker tables. And that idea, I don't know if any of you have ever been a part of something like that before, but it is a time when we're actually going to be out in the foyer here, and we're going to be having 8 speaker experts talk about topics that are listed in your program. The one that we did not have listed a name for, crisis, is going to be covered by Corey Runge from Flagstaff Police Department. So just so you know that. And this will be a time when you can spend an hour and a half. We encourage you to rotate who you're spending your time with, so you can have time to let other people, get to that table. But Sam Cochran, Major Cochran's going to be doing a table, so it'll be a time for you to be one-on-one and really share what you need help with, or information you'd like to get passed along, and exchange information. So we're hoping that that'll be a key time of this summit. And I don't know if Nastasia Walsh is here yet. I haven't seen her yet this morning, but I know she's planning to be here. So she was our keynote last year, and the program director for the National Association of Counties. And she is going to be doing a speaker table on stepping up. So nobody knows more about stepping up than Nastasia Walsh, and how that is playing out across the country. So if you'd like to spend some time at her table, that would be, I'm sure, worthwhile. And all of our expert tables are going to be awesome. So I think that's about all I wanted to say this morning. We're going to have one other thing, I guess, that I would say. Keep in mind that we're here to solve problems. There's been much in the news that we've all been experiencing this year and in the years prior, related to public safety and people with mental illness. And you've heard a lot of stories, you've seen a lot of things, you've heard a lot of things that are true, you've heard a lot of things that are not true. What we want to say is that mental illness is a disease. It's a brain disorder. Addiction, a disease, a brain disorder. And that we can't fix those, or we can't cure those diseases through a jail cell or through a locked prison door. As a matter of fact, the people that we send there often come back much sicker than when they first went in. So we know there's a place for jail. We know there's a place for prison. We don't think it's a place for people that were charged with crimes, breaking our criminal codes due to their illness. We know sometimes people need to be locked in secure hospitals forever, for the rest of their lives. But if one thing that you could take away from this conference, always remember that we're addressing a medical illness like we would heart disease or diabetes. The people that have it and are living with that disease didn't ask for it, and they shouldn't be blamed for having it. People not taking their medications should not be a criminal offense. People not taking their medications is something that we need to be proactive about, people that need it. And that's why we're focusing today's event on Title 36 court-ordered treatment issues. We're going to be having other roundtables about that topic, and we'll be talking about that topic for several years. There's been efforts around the state to change protocols and process and statute for Title 36. We think it'd be a good idea if all the stakeholders talked to each other before they did that. What we've seen is groups here, groups there. No wonder the legislators are confused. It's very hard to hear one cohesive voice about the topic. So you have an important part to play. I hope we can give you some tools, and we'll all be learning today from the experts that are here. We're very grateful for Justice Andrew Gould is here. Thank you, Justice Gould, for being here. Sheila Polk, our county attorney from Yavapai County, we're very honored that you're here, and actually going to be awarding you later in the evening. So it's an exciting day. Arizona is leading in this work. I do believe that's the case. So we are, I'm inspired, I know you'll be inspired, and that's a perfect way to introduce Daryl Phenix, who's going to do our invocation. So thank you, and Daryl, I'll let you go ahead.
Good morning. They made a big mistake. Number one, they gave me 2 cups of coffee. And when you give a preacher 2 cups of coffee and a microphone, we might be here a while. So I was thinking about stepping up when I was asked to do this. And one particular story in the Bible came to my remembrance. There were 4 guys that had a friend that was sick, and they had heard that there was a place that they could take him and to get him some help. So these 4 friends put their friend on a pallet, and they took him to the place. And when they got to the place, they found out that everybody got the memo, because everybody in the whole town was there, and it seemed like they couldn't get into the place. But because they were so compassionate about their friend's health, and they know that if they can get him into the place, that he can get the help that he needed. So these guys decided to step up. And what does that mean? What does it look like to step up? So in stepping up, they began to think out of the box. These 4 friends climbed up a wall, dragging their friend along the way. Up onto the roof of the house, the Bible says they tore the roof apart. Tore it apart. Somebody else's house. They was thinking out of the box. These 4 friends then lowered their friend down into the place where he was able to receive help. Now, Jesus was the one they were trying to get him to. And when Jesus saw the man, he didn't focus on the man. What he did was focus on the 4 friends. He said, because your friends was faithful enough and diligent enough to get you here, you're going to be healed. And the man picked up his bed and told him to get up and you're healed and leave. So the man picked up his bed and he left. His life was changed because of his 4 friends. His 4 friends decided to step up, like our 4 friends in CIT decided to step up. If they step up, lives will be changed. Our friends in the criminal justice system, if we step up, our lives will be changed. The lives of those that we're serving will be changed. If we step up, because the friends of MIHS, if we step up, the lives of our those that are seeking our service will be changed. If we step up, the police step up, then the lives of those we serve will be changed. If the sheriff department step up, the lives of those that we serve will be changed. So what's the point? Step up. So if you would say that to your neighbor, somebody just lean over to somebody and say, it's your time to step up. Go ahead. It's your time to step up. If we step up, and we put all of our resources together, and we band together as one group of people, the focus was on the 4 friends that was diligent. Even though they saw that the task was difficult, they didn't give up. They saw that it was hard, it wasn't going to be easy, they didn't give up. Stay focused. What you're trying to do is to get help to those that we're trying to serve that need our help. They're depending on us. And if we step up, they will receive the help that they need. And many of you don't know, I see the patients that are brought in by the police. And they're brought in chained up and bound up. But I also see them walk out the door independently and free because they got the medication, they got the help that they needed, they got the support that they needed. And if we step up, people all across this nation will be able to get the help they need. All we need to do is step up. Father, I thank you for this time. I thank you for everyone in this room on today that is going to attend this conference. And I'm praying, God, that the compassion that they have be injected with passion to not sit down or sit idle, but to step up and be a part of this great organization, to step up Arizona, to be able to move and in a way that would change the lives of those that are hurting, wounded, and broken, change their lives forever, just because the team came together and joined hands and decided we're not going to watch and we're not going to stand idly by, but we're going to step up. And when they step up, God, let lives be changed like never before for all of those that we serve. In Jesus' name we pray and we thank you, God. Amen. Thank you for your time. That was my time. Thank you for your time. They asked me how much time do I need. I told them I needed 30 minutes. I needed an hour and 30 minutes, and they said you had 10. So, thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Phenix, my husband. I'd like to introduce now, and it's actually my pleasure to introduce and welcome my sheriff, Paul Penzone.
That's just wrong. I gotta follow you? Really? I watched T.D. Jakes and I'm telling him you're coming after his job after that. Good Lord. Thank you guys for the time, first of all. It was funny, I was sitting over there earlier talking, and is it Ray that was up here earlier? I felt like I was in school again because I was talking and she was trying to get out squat. She just kind of looked over me like the teacher used to do when I was in grade school to give me that cue, like, it's time for you to stop talking. Let me begin by just saying thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here. Thank you for this blessing and privilege to be the sheriff of this incredible county. But most importantly, thank you for the work that you're doing. Because on the heels of what he spoke about, I'm a firm believer that, when we're young, I don't think we have a realization of the influence or the power that we possess to do good for others. Oftentimes we're trying to find ways to put ourselves in a position to thrive, or we pursue to acquire things that really don't have value. But ultimately, the greatest thing that we can do, the most valuable thing that we can do, is to improve the quality of life of others. So when I hear you speak about stepping up and making a difference, you are the difference makers. We have somewhat of a theme in the sheriff's office that I try to emphasize often, and that is to lead by example. No matter where you are in the organization, you matter. Your job has purpose, and the attitude that you come with in leading by example will either inspire or help improve the efforts of your peers, because they will see in you something that they want to see in themselves and be better at it. And I do spend time visiting the jails to see exactly what goes on in those cultures and those communities and those environments. As a matter of fact, I was just there last week, and I went during second, third shift to kind of get a feel for the evenings. I wanted to visit with staff to make sure they understood my appreciation for the work that they do, but I also wanted to see what it was like for the inmates. And I even spent time in the juvenile pod that we have, which is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see that so many young men have committed acts that maybe in different circumstances with different guardians, different environments, different neighborhoods, may not have fallen into that place. And what are we really doing to ensure that when they leave, they don't come back, that we give them some level of self-esteem? The same thing applies for mental illness and mental health. It is our greatest failure if we believe that the way to change behavior or to provide something for a person who is challenged by incarcerating them, that will lead to a greater outcome. And I don't say that with the context that I don't believe that there are people that commit egregious crimes that should be detained. But if in that population we choose to just mix in others who have other challenges that we can address, that we can improve, that we can support, so they can thrive and ultimately our community thrives, I think that's the greatest impact that we can have anywhere in the judicial system. And it's interesting, and I do want to give a shout out. I earlier saw Dr. Noggle, I think, wandering around out there somewhere. There she is. How are you? Nice to see you. And, and some of the colleagues from the law enforcement community that are here, I want to personally thank you, because I can remember, I became an officer in 1988. It's a long time ago. I'd like to say that it wasn't, but it was. And it's not that a scope of our responsibilities wasn't broad, but every day all of us are asked to do more with less. We're asked to be involved and to overcome challenges in areas that we have no expertise. And it's very easy to find a way to make an excuse. But for that person in need, what they don't need is our excuse. They need us to collaborate, to find solutions, so that ultimately our goal is to improve the quality of life for everyone in the community. And that's what you do. I want to go back to what I said earlier. You lead by example. And for that, I am grateful and I thank you, because you do change lives. And if there were 100 people and we could only impact 10 of them, shame on us if we haven't worked to impact every one of those 10. Because those 10 then will impact others. And it becomes contagious. So I want to close with this. I saw up there, it talked about criminal justice on the board. And the one word I want to take from that is just. And by definition, just is based on or behaving according to what is morally right and fair. It is absolutely morally right for us to invest in people who have a need, to ensure that we give them all the support, the love, the compassion, the services, and everything possible so that they can thrive. And anything short of that is short of justice. So I just want to close by thanking you, by telling you it is truly an honor to have this position. Most important thing that I can do as the sheriff, part of it is stand. And it was funny when they said look at the person next to you and say stand up. I was sitting next to Joaquin over there, and everybody else in the room was looking at me. And I was like, hold on a second. Why is everybody looking at me, telling me to stand up if I cut it short? So I get it. I get the message. I hear where you're coming from. I will not only stand up, but I will be sure to get out of the way of the employees in my organization who do the job well and make sure that we facilitate their success. Because I'm not the problem solver. I'm the person who should give you everything that you need so that you can thrive in your job to make it better for others, because I know you're the ones carrying the work. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for this honor.
We love Sheriff Penzone, don't we? Thank you, Sheriff, for being here, and thank you for coming back tonight so we can present you with an award. Okay, thank you. Wonder what he'll do with that if he has a lot of them. Well, okay, great. We are a little bit ahead of schedule, so I'm going to do something I forgot to do earlier. How many law enforcement do we have in the room today? Would you mind standing? Let's give them all a hand. Thank you. We're honored that you're here. And it's funny, I was explaining this morning how much law enforcement has been a part of the work that we do. And I was saying that they support us, and then I realized, no, we're supporting them. You guys are the ones doing all the work and leading the way. I remember Chief Rhodes, when I first met you up in Yavapai County, he was talking about a stroll that he was taking down in front of the jail cells and how he would look inside and see people that were there because they were really, really sick, and they would just, why are you here? And I'll never forget you telling us that simple story. But seeing what you all see every day, we know you're the real heroes, and we are working our best to keep you all safer, first of all, and to keep the community safer. So just thank you, and we will be a lot of our connect, and I want to thank Sam Cochran, who I egregiously forgot to mention earlier, who is here from Memphis. Let's give Sam a hand. Sam's a hero in this work of crisis intervention, the creator of crisis intervention teams that we've all been studying in textbooks for many, many years, and that many of you already know from CIT International and going to those conferences, which I know there was one last week, right, Major Cochran? But we're thrilled that you're here with us today, and I really appreciated the way you were working the room earlier. So I thought that was so neat. I mean, you know, when you get a speaker the caliber of Sam Cochran, I was imagining him sitting there, you know, and I could never find him because he was running around talking to every soul that he could connect with. So I think that speaks a lot to who Major Cochran is and why he's been able to accomplish so much. I am going to, oh no, can you bring me my, I'm sorry, I have to run off the stage. I need Justice Gould's paperwork there. Apologize. We have been working at this problem at many levels, and the Supreme Court, as you know, has had a mental health criminal justice committee. They've done work in mental health court standards a few years ago. Then most recently they had a subcommittee that was part of the Fair Justice Task Force. That committee work ended earlier this year. And there is a new one on the rise, a new group on the rise. And we are really grateful for our Supreme Court justices and Justice Andrew Gould, who is here with us today. We're really honored that you're here, Justice Gould. And I'm going to read a little bit of your bio. I won't read it all, but I mean, you all do have it in the program. But Justice Gould hails from Mountain Yuma, has worked there for a number of years, and those of you that are from out that way probably know the justice quite well. Justice Gould was appointed to the Arizona Supreme Court in 2017 after serving 5 years on Division I of the Arizona Court of Appeals. Prior to his appointment to the court, Justice Gould spent 11 years as a judge of the Superior Court in Yuma, where he served as both Associate Presiding Judge and Presiding Judge. He received his JD from Northwestern University School of Law and began his legal career in Phenix. And you can read the rest of that. He's done impressive work and really has had experience with the issues of mental illness and substance abuse. So let's welcome Justice Gould, and we're going to enjoy hearing from you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Before I get started, I just have to say, Reverend Phenix, I was raised Southern Baptist, so I've seen a lot of animated preachers, but I have never seen a preacher get up and knock around a microphone while they're preaching and not miss a beat. That was incredible. So I'll be mindful of this, but if I knock that microphone, I don't know if I'll be as adept as the pastor was. I want to thank Mary Lou for inviting me, Step Up, David's Hope, everybody who's here today. It's really a great privilege. I had a lot of experience with this issue when I was a young prosecutor. I was a prosecutor for a number of years, and then as a trial judge. So a lot of what I have to say to you comes from my time in the trenches, so to speak. One of the things that I think is important to know, you're going to hear about a lot of new programs. Some of you are here to talk about new programs with law enforcement and what courts are doing, what county attorneys are doing. And those are great things. And the importance of those I can stress by what my experience was as a trial judge and how the system really has not been very effective over the years to deal with mental illness and people who get involved in the criminal justice system with mental illness. I've had a lot of cases over the years that I've dealt with. I'll give one that is what I think an illustrative example of the problem. I'll refer to this defendant as Mike, but Mike was a young man. He had had problems in the home. His stepfather eventually kicked him out of the home, long history of mental illness. The mother was upset, or his mother was upset about him being kicked out of the home, but she understood that it was just becoming too difficult in the home. So he went and he lived on the streets. And the stepfather went and got an order of protection against him. And at one point, after a few months of this situation, Mike decided that he wanted to go back in the house and he wanted to eat an ice cream sandwich. So he broke into the home. I mean, it was his former home, but he didn't have a key. So he broke into the home. A neighbor saw him breaking into the home, called the police. He was arrested, and he got charged with burglary and trespass. So all those charges ended up in front of me. It's kind of hard when day in and day out, you're seeing a lot of serious crimes, and then the defendant comes in for a change of plea. When you get the facts, it's this odd set of facts where the victims are present. They're not really wanting any kind of punishment, but at the same time, they're throwing their hands up in the air. They don't know what to do. You hear the factual basis that he broke into the house and was eating an ice cream sandwich. I mean, that's not exactly the most serious crime that you see, but very typical of these types of offenses. They're kind of trespass, minor type things, scuffles. In the event, he pled guilty. I put him on probation. I think it was for an undesignated Class 6 felony. The mental illness issue had not really been addressed. It hadn't really been evaluated. And so the conditions of probation didn't really reflect his treatment needs. And to no surprise to anyone, he was back in court multiple times on petitions to revoke his probation. And after about 6 or 7 of those, again, not really addressing the underlying problem, Mike was revoked and sentenced to prison by me. Now, you may think, gee, Judge, that's a really harsh result. But at the time, I wasn't given a lot of information. I didn't really have a very good evaluation of his mental illness. There wasn't good communication with law enforcement. There wasn't good communication with probation. And so here this young man, really for sort of a nonsense crime, ends up going to prison and spends probably a year and a half on probation, nothing really effective happening for him. And perhaps the worst part of it all was we had hearing after hearing. His mother would come into court, stepfather would come into court. They were upset, they were frustrated. And so that I've had so many cases like that over the years. The system just hasn't been very good in dealing with these types of crimes and dealing with people that have mental illness. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that what I've just described to you is a common occurrence in a lot of courts throughout this country. It happens all the time. A lot of times people think about mental illness and they're thinking about, the defendant who went out and killed 3 people. That is a minuscule number of crimes. The studies have shown this in my own personal experience. I haven't really run across that. I've had some violent crimes involving people with mental illness, but the vast majority of the cases I have, it's this kind of thing. It's just sort of trespassing, breaking into a home, maybe having an encounter with a police officer and it ends up in a resisting arrest situation, and then he ends up in the court or she ends up in the court and we can't address it or treat it very well. But the criminal justice system is in fact, or it has been for many years, the primary means of dealing with mental illness. The jails have been the primary place where people are housed with mental illness. And the problem, of course, is jails aren't really set up to deal with mental illness. It's not a very therapeutic environment. The criminal justice system is not the best place or a very good place to deal with mental illness. The criminal justice system does have a rehabilitative element to it, but let's be honest, it's primarily a punitive system. It's primarily an accountability system. So you bring somebody in with mental illness, and it's not set up well to deal with it. But for a number of reasons, which I'm sure you're well aware of, it's been placed at the feet of judges and jails and police officers to deal with it. The other thing is, and this may come as no surprise to you, judges are not psychiatrists, they're not psychologists, they're lawyers. They don't really know anything about mental illness, they don't know how to treat it, and so these cases are coming in front of judges who don't have any training on it. They know how to read statutes and they know how to read cases, but they don't know very much about mental illness. They don't know what is a good treatment plan or how to deal with it. And so now you're putting these cases in front of individuals who really don't have a lot of training in that area. And the only time a judge can do an effective job, I would argue, is if family and those who know the defendant can educate the judge, and experts can come in and tell the judge what's going on and how to handle it. But you have a perfect storm, or over the years you've had a perfect storm, of courts having to deal with it, judges being the primary persons who are addressing it, and they're not trained very well to address it. The other thing is, and I had to learn this my first day on the bench, I always thought judges knew everything. They don't. They only know what you tell them. So if there's a case in front of a judge, don't assume that the judge somehow knows the history of this case and all the problems that the family has had and all the treatment issues. The judge doesn't know any of that unless you tell the judge about it, unless you bring in an evaluation or you have the defendant evaluated. None of that is known to the judge, so you have to educate judges. Unfortunately, there are three primary ways that mental illness comes to, or traditionally has come to the attention of a judge, and none of them are very good. The most common method is competency evaluation. So every defendant has a fundamental right to be mentally competent when they stand trial. If there's an issue, typically what happens is the defense attorney will file a motion under Rule 11, Arizona Criminal Rule 11, to have the defendant's competency evaluated. Now, the problem with that is the defendant has probably been in custody for 30, 60, 90 days. They're sitting in the jail. They've had no treatment. Most likely, they don't have had no medication, and any medications they had when they're admitted in the jail have been taken away from them. So they're in a non-therapeutic environment. They're decompensating even further, and then the judge gets this motion to evaluate competency. And that's not a panacea, because competency is an extremely low standard. It's not a psychological standard. It's a legal standard. And a person can suffer from a mental illness, disability, or defect and still be competent to stand trial. It happens all the time. I can tell you about a case Donna and I had some contact with, where the defendant had watched a lot of these underworld movies. You're familiar with those, with the vampires? And he had an underlying mental illness, but he was convinced that he had to kill the queen of the vampires. And so he went out in a very unusual way, and he got involved in an auto accident, and he told this story to his lawyer. He was evaluated for competency. He thought throughout the whole case that, in fact, if he didn't kill the queen of the vampires, that the world would be destroyed, and he was found competent, because the legal standard is much lower than what you would think. So people get disappointed when they see the judge found the defendant competent. The judge is following the law. So it's not an effective tool to identify mental illness or to deal with mental illness. And the other thing I would tell you is the delay is inordinate. Sometimes these motions aren't brought to a judge's attention for months, and the defendant is sitting in jail. And then it can take months to get the defendant evaluated and then to set in a hearing. And finally, it's brought to the judge's attention. And all that happens with a competency determination is the judge says the defendant is competent to stand trial. It doesn't address what should be done about it. It just allows the case to go forward. The other problem with the competency evaluation is if the defendant is found incompetent but restorable, then you begin the restoration process. That can take months. That can involve a restoration of competency program in the county or at the Arizona State Hospital. They can go up. It can take months and months. And I've had situations where defendants have been found restored to competency. They come back to the jail. They're not given the prescriptions that were prescribed for them in the jail. And so 2 months later, they've decompensated, and now you have a defendant who's incompetent again. If it's a serious charge, they're going to end up going back to the Arizona State Hospital. And sometimes these cases can take a year and a half, and all you're looking at is whether or not the defendant is competent to stand trial. The other problem with the competency procedure is if the defendant is found incompetent and non-restorable, then what are the options that the judge has? Well, there's really two primary options. One, the judge can dismiss the case. It usually takes a county attorney's motion to do that. Or the court can order the defendant transferred to a Title 36 proceeding. Unfortunately, historically, treatment facilities have not been very open to taking defendants on transfers on Title 36. In fact, in the almost 12 years I was a trial judge, not one time did they ever take a transfer, ever. That's how hard it is. So the two options, if the defendant is found incompetent, non-restorable, are dismissal, or you try to transfer it, and it's unlikely that they'll be transferred to a Title 36. So what's the end result? The charges go away, The defendant has spent 6, 8, 9 months in jail, and they're still not getting any treatment. What do you think's going to happen with that defendant, with that young person or that person? They're going to be right back in court in about 6 months later, and I've seen it happen over and over again, a revolving door. You know that they're not going to be restored to competency, but they get charged. Maybe another expert says they're competent. It just starts all over again. So it's not a very effective procedure for diverting these cases or addressing treatment needs, and there's a lot of delay involved in it. The second means that it comes to a court's attention, mental illness, is an insanity defense. The insanity defense is so rare now. It almost is never used, and that's because, again, it's a very low bar. All the state has to show is that the defendant knew the act was wrong. That's all that it has to show. So it's not used very often. Of course, an insanity defense comes at trial at the end of a case, so the case could be pending for months or a year before the evidence regarding the mental illness is even presented. If the defendant is found guilty except insane, then the court can order treatment at that point, but it's a very restricted procedure, and again, as I said, it's not used very often. And the third means that it comes to a judge's attention is that mitigation. A defendant can have an evaluation done for the purpose of mitigation to get a lesser sentence, a more lenient sentence. They can actually make a motion for an evaluation. But the fact of the matter is, in the trial courts, that doesn't happen very often. The information isn't brought to the court's attention. There isn't a request for an evaluation. It's very rare. I'll mention as a note, one defense that's not available in the state of Arizona is diminished capacity. There's a case called State v. Mott that says a defendant can't present evidence that their ability to formulate the intent required to commit a crime is diminished. Not allowed to do that in Arizona. Other states you can. When I was a prosecutor in Indiana, you could. So again, that won't come to the judge's attention at trial in any form other than an insanity defense. So what's left at sentencing? What's a judge left to do? What kind of information does a judge have regarding mental illness? I can tell you in the vast majority of cases, almost nothing. Almost nothing. The judge may not even be aware at all of the issue. But most often the judge certainly doesn't have any kind of evaluation or records or reports, anything like that. Occasionally a family will step up and provide some information, but it's very rare. So judges are making sentencing decisions with none of this information. Now, if it's an in or out decision regarding prison, that's one thing. If it's a mandatory prison sentence, perhaps that doesn't have as much impact, at least in terms of the judge's sentencing. But as we know, the vast majority of sentences are probation. And so the judge is placing somebody on probation, and he or she does not have a critical piece of information about what their treatment needs are on probation, how to style those conditions of probation, what they should be doing on probation. I will typically, or in the days when I was on the trial bench, I would have information about substance abuse, but I certainly wouldn't know if it was a co-occurring disorder. I wouldn't know if there was an underlying mental illness. So in many instances, I would be sentencing a defendant to drug treatment and counseling and so forth, and would have no idea that there was a mental illness issue underlying it. Now, what are the chances for success of that defendant on probation if we're missing that issue? Not very good. We rarely have information about co-occurring disorders, about mental illness. And so here's what happens. This is the reality unless we continue to do the things that all of you are doing in this room. A judge is placing somebody on probation who is absolutely set up to fail. There's no way. There's no way. They're either not getting the conditions that they need to be rehabilitated, or they're being asked to do certain things on probation that they are absolutely incapable of complying with. I'll give you an example of a case I had where actually the attorney stepped in and prevented a situation where the defendant would have been revoked probably in 3 months. I had a case a young man was living with this older man. The older man had taken him in sort of as an adopted son, and they had a very close relationship. The young man lived with this man for a number of years, but the young man had a lot of issues, some severe mental illness issues, and the old man died. He had a heart attack. He didn't know how to deal with it. So he kept the body around for a while. There started to be some problems with decay, so he wrapped him up in cellophane. And he kept him for months because he couldn't let go of him. Well, Social Security kept on sending Social Security checks there, and this young man, he cashed a few of them, but it certainly wasn't some scheme he'd set up to get Social Security benefits. Some of them he never cashed. And at some point, the Attorney General's office became involved because of some welfare fraud. So he got charged with a number of theft charges and fraudulent schemes and so forth, and he was in the system. Fortunately, in that case, I had a defense counsel and a prosecutor who early on, within 30 days, 60 days of the charge being filed, said, "Judge, we need to talk to you about this defendant. We want to have a settlement conference." A settlement conference is where a judge, with agreement of the parties, can sit down and discuss plea offers, and both parties are present, and the defendant is present. But they wanted to have the settlement conference not only to talk about a proper settlement in the case, but to give me a chance to meet the young man. Again, when you're a judge, you don't get to talk to the defendant. You don't have any personal interaction, so you have no feeling for what the person's like or how they interact. I mean, it just, unfortunately, that's the way it is. And so we sat down the settlement conference, and this young man had a lot of issues. He needed treatment, and clearly putting him on probation with any type of standard conditions of probation, he would never make it on probation. It would be a petition to revoke almost immediately, and without some kind of treatment and addressing his underlying issues, it would be a disaster. So those attorneys brought that case to me very quickly. It was pled out. We came up with a very specific set of conditions. I only put him on probation for 6 months with very minimal requirements, and then they tried to initiate a Title 36, which I believe they were successful in doing. But I tell you that story because for every instance like that, because of the congestion in the courts, maybe some people not caring as much as these two attorneys, that case could have progressed through the system. He could have sat in the jail for a year. Unlikely he would have gone to prison for that offense, but put him on standard conditions of probation, and there's no way he could have satisfied those conditions of probation. So the importance of that story also is that getting this information to a judge early, letting a judge know what's going on, can help divert the case in the proper direction. So in the end, the judge has very little information at sentencing, and it's something that is a failing in the system. Now, I'll mention also conditions of release hearings. When the judge sets conditions of release, the same problem can occur. The judge can place conditions on a defendant who may be suffering from mental illness, not be aware that that's the underlying problem, and again, the defendant will be doomed to fail. He will violate those conditions of release. The conditions of release will be revoked, and he'll be sitting in jail until he gets a trial or he enters a change of plea. Some of these changes of plea are challenging because a defendant has to make a factual basis at the change of plea. And if someone's suffering from mental illness, it's confusing to them. They may not really understand what they did at the time, and so they're admitting to something that their lawyer has told them they have to admit to, and they don't really understand what they've done. And one of the problems with that, in addition to really being concerning for due process, is how can you expect somebody to perform on probation for allegedly committing a crime if they don't even know what they did? There's really no connection between the plea and the sentence and the conditions of probation. So what I would tell you is, all the programs, I talked to Sheila for a little bit, and I'm aware generally of these programs throughout the state. Anything that can get early identification of a mental illness issue is helpful in the system. Police officers, I applaud you that are in this room that are diverting those cases out of the criminal justice system, because as you can see from what I'm telling you, my experience with thousands of cases in the court, or hundreds anyway, is once it gets into the criminal justice system, it gets a life of its own, and it's not a good system to deal with it. It just isn't set up well. So if police officers can take those cases and divert them out, get them to treatment facilities, then we never have the problem in the first place of having the case in a system that doesn't fit well. The other thing is, I know that there's a new rise in development of mental health courts. We had one of the first ones down in Yuma, and a mental health court is in many ways a judge's best friend in dealing with mental illness. There are two tracks that you can follow in a mental health court. One is a pre-conviction track, and in a pre-conviction track, the parties identify the defendant has mental health issue, and you can get them right into the specialty court with a mental health court judge, all the providers, all the specialists in that one court, and if they successfully complete the mental health court program, the case just gets dismissed. So that it's early, they get out of the criminal justice system quickly, they don't end up with a conviction, they're not on a standard type of probation, and it's just a great way to divert those cases out early on. There's also post-conviction cases in mental health court. I would prefer the pre-conviction route, but sometimes it's a post-conviction route, and that's helpful as well too, because at least at the time of sentencing, the judge can get a recommendation from a team in the mental health court that recommends probation in mental health court, and you can get them into treatment, and you can get them into conditions of probation that mean something to them, matter to them, and hopefully help them so that they're not coming back again so quickly in the system. There's obviously a need for more funding, the treatment facilities, so that the Title 36 proceedings are more robust, so that they're more of an option, so that if you do have a case with competency, it's a real alternative to have it transferred into Title 36 proceedings. All these things are developments that I'm glad to hear, and I hope you continue to develop. One of the most frustrating things as a judge is you're sentencing somebody and you're not really helping them, and you have this sinking feeling in your gut that you're going to see them again real soon. I worked for many years as a drug court judge. I wasn't a mental health court judge, but I certainly worked closely with the mental health court. Oftentimes what we would do with our drug court is if we identified that really it was a co-occurring disorder and the real problem was mental illness, we transfer them to mental health court. Sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 months of sobriety to see that there's really another problem here, and drug treatment is just scratching the surface. So I'm a big believer in these specialty courts. I actually believe that drug court and mental health court can work very closely together. The other thing that drug courts can do as sort of a screening mechanism is they can identify veterans with PTSD, try to get them into veterans courts, because a lot of times these cases are presented as substance abuse problems, and that's not really the problem. Let me just close with one of my favorite quotes. It's a quote from Gandhi. It's probably not as exciting as Reverend Phenix's quote, but I don't know if I could match that. A true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. If we can't treat people who have mental illness fairly and humanely, if we're housing them in jails and sending them to prison and running them through the criminal justice program, then that is a commentary on our society and the humanity of our society. And people will measure us by that. So I encourage you in continuing to do what you can do. I can assure you that the Supreme Court is ready to support you in any way we can. And thank you for having me here this morning.
Thank you, Justice Andrew Gould. So how many of you will remember that speech you just heard for a while? So we'll be calling. We'll be we'll be keeping you in the loop, and hopefully you'll keep us in yours. Okay, we're a little bit on a different schedule than we had originally anticipated, so what I'm thinking is this. Why don't we take a break, and when we come back, we will have Major Sam Cochran, and we'll be able to give Major Cochran a little more time. And so let's come back in, say, 10:15. All right, thank you.